Class 12th Rainbow. Lesson number 1 Water. Paragraph first starts. Man has, through the ages, sought in vain for an imaginary elixir of life, the divine Amrita, a draught of which was thought to confer immortality. But the true elixir of life lies near to our hands, for it is the commonest of all liquids, plain water. I remember one day standing on the line which separates the Libyan desert from the valley of the Nile in Egypt. On one side was visible a sea of billowing sand, without a speck of green or a single living thing anywhere visible on it. On the other side lay one of the greenest, most fertile and densely populated areas to be found anywhere on the earth, teeming with life and vegetation. What made this wonderful difference? Why, it is the water of river Nile flowing down to the Mediterranean from its sources. A couple of thousands of miles away, geologists tells us that the entire soil of the Nile Valley is the creation of the river itself, brought down as the finest silt in its flood waters from the highlands of Abyssinia and from remote Central Africa, and laid down through the ages in the through which the Nile flows into the sea, Egypt. In fact, was made by its river. Its ancient civilization was created and is sustained by the life-giving waters which come down year after year with unfailing regularity. Paragraph number 2 starts. I give this example and could give many others to emphasize that this common substance which we take for granted in our everyday life is the most potent and the most wonderful thing on the face of our earth. It has played a role of vast significance in shaping the course of the earth's history and continues to play the leading role in the drama of life on the surface of our planet. Paragraph number 3 starts. There is nothing which adds so much to the beauty of countryside as water, be it just a little stream trickling over the rocks, or a little pond by the wayside, where the cattle quench their thirst of an evening, the rain-fed tanks that are so common in South India, alas, often so sadly neglected in their maintenance, are a cheering sight when they are full. They are, of course, shallow, but this is less evident since the water is silt-laden and throws the light back, and the bottom does not therefore show up. These tanks play a vital role in South Indian agriculture. In Mysore, for example, much of rice is grown in them. Some of these tanks are surprisingly large, and it is a beautiful sight to see the sun rise or set over one of them. Water is a landscape may be compared to the eyes in a human face. It reflects the mood of the hour being bright and gay, when the sun shines, turning to dark and gloomy when the sky is overcast. Paragraph number 3 starts. One of the most remarkable facts about water is its power to carry silt or finely divided soil in suspension. This is the origin of the characteristic color of the water in rain-fed tanks. This color varies with the nature of the earth in the catchment area and is most vivid immediately after a fresh inflow following rain. Swiftly flowing water can carry fairly large and heavy particles. The finest particles, however, remain floating with the liquid in spite of their greater density and are carried too. Please turn the page. Great distances. Such particles are of course extremely small, but their number is great and incredibly large amounts of solid matter can be transported in this way. When silt-laden water mixes with the salt water of the sea, there is a rapid precipitation of the suspended matter. This can be readily seen when one travels by steamer down a great river to the deep sea. The color of the water changes successively from the muddy red or brown of silt through varying shades of yellow and green, finally to the blue of the deep sea. Those great tracts of land have been formed by silt thus deposited is evident on an examination of the soil in alluvial areas. Such land, consisting as it does of finely divided matter, is usually very fertile. Paragraph change. The flow of water has undoubtedly played a great part and a beneficent one in the geological processes by which the soil on the earth's surface has been formed from the rocks of its crust. The same agency, however, under appropriate conditions, can also play a destructive part and wash away the soil, which is the foundation of all agriculture, and if allowed to proceed unchecked, can have the most disastrous effects on the life of the country. The problem of soil erosion is one of the serious import in various countries, especially in many parts of India. The conditions under which it occurs and the measures by which it can be checked are deserving of the closest study. Soil erosion occurs in successive steps, the earliest of which may easily pass unnoticed. In the later stages, the cutting up and washing away of the earth is only too painfully apparent in the formation of deep gullies and ravines, which make all agriculture impossible. Sudden bursts of excessively heavy rain resulting in a large runoff of surplus water is the principal factor in causing soil erosion. Contributory causes are the slope of the land, removal of the protective coat of vegetation, the existence of ruts along which the water can flow with rapidly gathering momentum, and the absence of any checks to such flow. Incredibly large quantities of precious soil can be washed away if such conditions exist, as is unhappily too often the case. The menace which soil erosion presents to the continuance of successful agriculture is an alarming one in many parts of India, calling urgently for attention and preventive action. The terracing of the land, the construction of burns to check the flow of water, the practice of contour cultivation and the planting of appropriate types of vegetation are amongst the measures that have been suggested. It is obvious that the aim should be to check the flow of water at the earliest possible stage before it has acquired any appreciable momentum and corresponding large destructive power. Paragraph change. Water is the basis of life. Every animal and every plant contains a substantial proportion of free or combined water in its body, and no kind of psychological activity is possible in which the fluid does not play an essential part. Water is of course necessary for animal life, while moisture in the soil is equally imperative for the life and growth of plants and trees, though the quantity necessarily varies enormously with the species. The conservation and utilization of water is thus fundamental for human welfare. Apart from artesian water, the ultimate source in all cases is rain or snowfall. Much of Indian agriculture depends on seasonal rainfall and is therefore very sensitive to any failure or irregularity of the same. The problems of soil erosion and of inadequate or irregular rainfall are closely connected with each other. It is clear that the adoption of techniques preventing soil erosion would also help to conserve and keep the water where it is wanted. In other words, on and in the soil, and such techniques therefore serve a double purpose. It is evident, however, that in our country, having only seasonal rainfall, an immense quantity of rain water must necessarily run off the ground. The collection and utilization of this water is therefore of vital importance. Much of it flows down into the streams and rivers and ultimately finds its way to the sea. Incredibly large quantities of the precious fluid are thus lost to the country. Paragraph change. The harnessing of our rivers, the water of which now mostly runs to waste, is a great national problem which must be considered and dealt with in national lines. Vast areas of land which at present are mere scrub jungles could be turned into fertile and prosperous country by courageous and well-planned action. Paragraph change. Closely connected with the conservation of water supplies is the problem of afforestation. The systematic planting of suitable trees in every possible or even in impossible areas, and the development of what one can call civilized forests, as distinguished from wild and untamed jungles, is one of the most urgent needs of India. Such plantations would directly and indirectly prove a source of untold wealth to the country. They would check soil erosion and conserve the rainfall of the country from flowing away to waste, and would provide the necessary supplies of cheap fuel, and thus render unnecessary the wasteful conversion of farmyard manure into a form of fuel. Paragraph change. The measures necessarily to control the movement of water and conserve its supplies can also serve subsidiary purpose of value to the life of the countryside. By far the cheapest form of internal transport in a country is by boats and barges through canals and rivers. We hear much about programs of rail and road construction, but far too little about the development of internal waterways in India. Then again, the harnessing of water supplies also makes possible the development of hydroelectric power. The availability of electric power would make a tremendous difference to the life of the countryside and enable the rural economy to be improved in various directions. In particular, it would enable underground water to be tapped to a greater extent than at present, and thus help to overcome the difficulties arising from irregularity or inadequacy of other source of supply. Paragraph change. In one sense, water is the commonest of liquids. In other sense, it is the most uncommon of liquids, with amazing properties which are responsible for its unique power of maintaining animal and plant life. The investigation of the nature and properties of water is therefore of the highest scientific interest and is far from. Please turn the page. Being an exhaustive field of research. Chapter end. Lesson number 2. A room 10 by 8. Paragraph number 1 starts. This room might be 10 by 8, said Mrs. Malik, pointing to a square in the draft plan lying on the table before them. It was the third time that she had made this suggestion. It seemed it didn't register on either her husband or the architect engaged to design the house. Paragraph change. The Maliks were going to have a house of their own in Delhi. They had purchased a plot in the most fashionable colony of the town some time ago. Now that they were posted back in Delhi, they thought they might as well have the house built. Paragraph change. In her heart of hearts, Mrs. Malik also decided that after completion of the house, she would stay back in Delhi even if her husband was transferred to another station. She was sick of their postings. Every other year, they were moved to a new place. Now that the children were grown up, it was not desirable to shift them from school. Mrs. Malik said if he must, Mr. Malik could go all alone. She would settle down permanently in Delhi with the children. She would have her mother-in-law for company. Mr. Malik had no objection to it. Paragraph change. This room might be 10 by 8. Mrs. Malik repeated. Her husband was attending to a telephone call in the adjacent room. But this is a store, the architect explained to Mrs. Malik. Yes, but I thought it could be my mother-in-law's room, and after her, it might be used as a storeroom. The architect didn't seem to understand. He looked puzzled by Mrs. Malik's observation. I mean, my mother-in-law could use the room for the present. As you know, she is old and infirm. She isn't going to be there for, and after her, it could be converted into a storeroom. Mrs. Malik explained haltingly. Paragraph change. Mr. Malik joined them. It seems while talking on the telephone, he had also given thought to the suggestion. He, too, was of the opinion that the store should be a little bigger. It is always better to have a commodious storeroom so that one can move about the trunks more freely. Then it is also more convenient to keep it tidy. It was decided that the room adjacent to the kitchen should be 10 by 8. The courtyard would be a little narrower, but that didn't matter much. All the rest had already been provided for, and the plan was submitted for approval to the corporation. Mrs. Malik took an untiring interest in the construction of, please turn the page, the house. She would be seen standing at the side with her umbrella throughout the day. She supervised every detail. At times, she would give a hand to the masons and others. She was the first to arrive at the construction site and left after everyone had gone away. She ensured that there was no wastage of material and the labor did not idle about. Before long the house was completed. Mrs. Malik insisted that she would have new furniture made for the house. She would not let the old furniture enter the new house, not a piece of it. They were still in the midst of plans to shift when they learnt that the house had been acquired by the government. Mrs. Malik was furious, but the next moment, when Mr. Malik mentioned the rent assessed, she quietened down. Paragraph change. While supervising the construction of the house, she had cultivated love for her neighbors and made friends in the colony. She thought of various plans for doing up the house. Everything had to be forgotten. Paragraph change. Then they were transferred from Delhi. Mrs. Malik was happy. She would no more see her house, regret not being able to live in it, and then thinking of the substantial rent, feel consoled. Transferred from one place to another. They had to wait for many more years for another term of posting in Delhi. In the meanwhile, Mrs. Malik's mother-in-law passed away. Their daughter had been married. In a way, they were lucky, and their house had been rented to the government. Private tenants are such a headache. There is no end to their complaints and demands, and then they are more often than not irregular in the payment of rent. Mrs. Malik house having been requisitioned by the government, the rent was credited to their bank account every month regularly. Only their son remained to be married now. Mr. Malik thought that they would rather be done with it before retiring. Their son had been married. Mr. Malik had retired from service, but their house had not yet been released by the government. Mr. and Mrs. Malik lived with their son and daughter-in-law in a rented house. Mr. Malik was still fighting with the government for the release of the house when his end came. He passed away without being able to live in his house even for a day. Paragraph change. Now, within 3 months, the house was de-requisitioned. Mrs. Malik's daughter-in-law was keener than Mrs. Malik to shift to her own house. The moment they were restored possession of the house, she had it painted and polished and started shifting. The furniture dealer had been ordered to supply a number of pieces, which he did. Paragraph change. They had to shift on Monday morning, but as they woke up, they found that it was raining. The downpour was rather heavy. They waited and waited. Then it was time for Mrs. Malik's son to go to the office. It was decided that they would shift in the evening. It continued to rain throughout the day. It was raining as heavily as ever in the evening also. Monday, being an auspicious day, Mrs. Malik wanted to shift if they could. Out of consideration for his mother, the son decided to shift even though it continued to rain heavily. They sent for a taxi in addition to their own car and made a formal move. The rest of the luggage could be shifted later. It was raining incessantly. Sitting in the back seat of the car, Mrs. Malik was lost in memories. Paragraph change. What pains she had taken while the house was under construction. The day when she missed her meals, the days She stood in the scorching heat of the sun, supervising the work in progress. The days she was drenched in rain. The architect had prepared a sketch of the house in color. The way it would look when completed. It had the figure of the lady of the house standing on the veranda with her back towards the marble pillar. Elegant and graceful, an image of contentment clad in a maroon sari. Mrs. Malik felt that the architect had painted her, but she never wore maroon-colored sari. The figure in the sketch, however, was as tall as Mrs. Malik, reclining against the pillar. She stood the way Mrs. Malik used to stand. Mrs. Malik saw the figure in the sketch and would go and stand before the dressing table many a time. She thought that she must show that sketch to her daughter-in-law sometime. Paragraph change. Her daughter-in-law was sitting on the front seat with her husband, moving the rear view glass of the car towards her. She started repainting her lips. Where was the need to paint the lips when they were going to their own house? At the most they would eat and then go to sleep. Strange are the ways of modern girls. And how the girl talked! She was jabbering incessantly. Why must she talk with her own husband in English? Paragraph change. Mrs. Malik had not picked up English. She had failed in this only. She had accomplished everything else in life. She learnt ballroom dancing. Please turn the page. Suddenly, it occurred to Mrs. Malik that maybe the figure painted by the architect was that of her daughter-in-law. How could that be? She was nowhere on the scene when the plan of the house was prepared. But then she was wearing a maroon-colored sari that the figure in the sketch had. Yes, it was a maroon color. Mrs. Malik never liked maroon color. It was too loud for her taste. It was girls like her daughter-in-law who were fond of maroon color. Paragraph change. She can wear maroon surely, said Mrs. Malik to herself. I wish I could also work as hard as I did. I had every brick of the house laid before my eyes. In sun and rain, I stood on the site supervising the construction from early in the morning till late in the night. Many a time I helped the masons with mortar and bricks. Many times I hauled the rubber pipe and sprayed water on the plastered wall. Paragraph change. Then they reached the house. His son drove the car straight to the porch and her daughter-in-law jumped out of it. And there she stood reclining against the marble pillar of the veranda, exactly the way the architect had painted the figure in the sketch. Mrs. Malik felt a wrench in her heart. Maybe the architect had mocked at her. Standing on the veranda, close to the pillar, trying to cover her elaborate hairdo with the maroon-colored sari, her daughter-in-law was giving instructions to the servants about the luggage in the taxi following the car. The luggage had been removed from the taxi. The taxi driver drove away after having been paid. Mrs. Malik was still sitting on the back seat of their car. She had a strange sinking sensation. Paragraph change. Then her son and daughter-in-law entered the house. They put on the lights one by one. Every room was lit up. Mrs. Malik looked on wide-eyed, still sitting in the back seat of her car. In the excitement, nobody seemed to have remembered to open the door for her the way it was done. Suddenly, her son thought of his mother. He ran to the porch and opened the door of the car. A drive in the evening always makes me go to sleep. The mother spoke in a whisper. Her daughter-in-law had also come out. Everyone was laughing. Mrs. Malik's daughter-in-law was standing against the marble pillar on the veranda again. She was trying to cover her hairdo with her maroon-colored sari. "I am not going to eat. I have no appetite," said Mrs. Malik. "I would like to sleep. The servants had laid dinner on the table." "Then you better retire to your room," said the daughter-in-law, pointing to room 10 by 8, and her son conducted Mrs. Malik to it. Holding her hand, she was feeling terribly drowsy. Mrs. Malik shook her head again, but what was wrong with it? Her husband had already gone. She would follow him. One day she must do it. "I thought it could be my mother-in-law's room, and after her it might be converted into a store." These words re-echoed in Mrs. Malik's ears, and then she heard her daughter-in-law comment, "The house is otherwise very well planned. It lacks only a storeroom. I would like to have a big enough store." Mrs. Malik heard it, and she felt as if she was sinking deep and deep into the bottomless well. Chapter end. Lesson 3. Third Thoughts. This story was told to me by a friend. "It is my destiny," said he, "to buy in the dearest markets and to sell, if I succeed in selling at all, in the cheapest. Usually, indeed, having tired of a picture of a decorative article, I have positively to give it away, almost to make its acceptance by another a personal favor to me. But the other day was marked by an exception to this rule, so striking that I have been wondering if perhaps the luck has not changed and I am, after all, destined to be that most enviable thing. a successful dealer. Paragraph change. It happened thus: in drifting about the old curiosity shops of a cathedral city, I came upon a portfolio of watercolor drawings, among which was one that to my eye would have been a possible Turner, even if an earlier owner had not shared that opinion or hope, and set the magic name with all its initials, so often placed in the wrong order, beneath it. "How much is this?" I asked scornfully. Paragraph change. "Well," said the dealer, "if it were a genuine Turner, it would be worth anything. But let's say 10 shillings. You can have it for that. But I don't mind if you don't, because I am going to London next week and should take it with me to get an opinion." I pondered. "Mind you, I don't guarantee it," he added. I gave him the 10 shillings. By what incredible means I found a purchaser for the drawing at £50. There is no need to tell, for the point of this narrative resides not in bargaining with collectors, but in bargaining with my own soul. The astonishing fact remains that I achieved a profit of £49 10 and was duly elated. I then began to think. Paragraph change. The dealer, so my thoughts ran, in that little street by the cathedral west door. He ought to participate in this. He behaved very well to me, and I ought to behave well to him. It would be only fair to give him half. Paragraph change. Thereupon I sat down and wrote a little note saying that the potential Turner drawing, which no doubt he recollected, had turned out to be authentic, and I had great pleasure in enclosing him half of the proceeds, as I considered that the only just. Please turn the page. And decent courts. Having no stamps and the hour being late, I did not post this and went to bed. Paragraph change. At about 3:30 a.m. I woke widely up and according to custom began to review my life's errors, which are in no danger of ever suffering from loneliness. From these I reached by way of mitigation my recent successful piece of chaffering and put the latter to the dealer under both examination and cross-examination. Why? So my thoughts ran, give him half. Why be quixotic? This is no word for quixotry. It was my eye that detected the probability of the drawing, not his. He had indeed failed, did not know his own business. Why put a premium or inaptitude? No, a present of, say, £10 at the most would more than adequately meet the case. Paragraph change. Sleep still refusing to oblige me, I took a book of short stories and read one. Then I closed my eyes again and again, began to think about the dealer. Why, so my thoughts ran, send him £10. It will only give him a wrong idea of his customers, none other of whom would be so fair, so sporting as he will expect similar letters every day and be disappointed, and then he will become embittered and go down the vale of tears, a miserable creature. He looked a nice old man too. A pity, nay, a crime, to endure such a nature. No, £10 is absurd. 5 would be plenty. 10 would put him above himself. Paragraph change. While I was dressing the next morning, I thought about the dealer again. Why should I? So my thoughts ran directly. I had for the first time in my life brought off a financial coup, spoil it by giving a large part of the profit away. Was not that flying in the face of goddess of business, whoever she may be? Was it not asking her to disregard me only a day or so after we had at last got on terms? There is no fury like a woman scorned. It would probably be the end of me. City magnates are successful probably just because they don't do these foolish impulsive things. Impulse is the negation of magnetism. If I am to make any kind of figure in this new role of fine art speculator, so my thoughts continued, I must control my feelings. No, £5 is absurd. A douceur of £1 will meet the case. It will be nothing to me, or at any rate, nothing serious but a gift of quail and manna from a clear sky to the dealer, without however doing him any harm. £1 will be ample, accompanied by a brief note. The note was the effect that I had sold the drawing at a profit which enabled me to make him a present, because it was an old and perhaps odd belief of mine that one should do this kind of thing, good luck should be shared. Paragraph change. I had the envelope in my pocket containing the note and the check when I reached the club for lunch, and that afternoon I played bridge so disastrously that I was glad I had not posted it. Paragraph change. After all, so my thoughts ran as I destroyed the envelope and contents. Such bargains are all parts of the game. Buying and selling are a perfectly straightforward matter between dealer and customer. The dealer asks as much as he thinks he can extort, and the customer, having paid it, is under no obligation whatever to the dealer. The incident is closed. Chapter end.
Rainbow, Class 12th, page number 21, Lesson 4, Lost Spring. Sometimes I find a rupee in the garbage. Why do you do this? I ask Sahib, whom I encounter every morning scrounging for gold in the garbage dumps of my neighborhood. Sahib left his home long ago, set amidst the green fields of Dhaka. His home is not even a distant memory. There were many storms that swept away their fields and homes. His mother tells him that's why they left looking for gold in the big city where he now lives. Paragraph change. I have nothing else to do, he mutters, looking away. Go to school, I say glibly, realizing immediately how hollow the advice must sound. There is no school in my neighborhood. When they build one, I will go. If I start a school, will you come? I ask, half joking. Yes, he says, smiling broadly. A few days later, I see him running up to me. Is your school ready? Paragraph change. It takes longer to build a school. I say, embarrassed at having made a promise that was not meant, but promises like mine abound in every corner of his bleak world. Paragraph change. After months of knowing him, I ask him his name, Sahibe Alam. He announces he does not know what it means. If he knew its meaning, Lord of the Universe, he would have a hard time believing it. Unaware of what his name represents, he roamed the street with his friends, an army of barefoot boys who appear like the morning birds and disappear at noon. Over the months, I have come to recognize each of them. Paragraph change. Why aren't you wearing chappals? I ask one. My mother did not bring them down from the shelf, he answers simply. Paragraph change. Even if she did, he will throw them off. Adds another who is wearing shoes that do not match. When I comment on it, he shuffles his feet and says nothing. I want shoes, says a third boy who has never owned a pair all his life. Traveling across the country, I have seen children walking barefoot in cities on village roads. It is not lack of money, but a tradition to stay barefoot is one explanation. I wonder if this is only an excuse to explain away a perpetual state of poverty. I remember a story a man from Udupi once told me. As a young boy he would go page turn 22 page to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop briefly at the temple and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, I visited his town and the temple, which was now drowned in an air of desolation. In the backyard where lived the new priest, there were red and white plastic chairs. A young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrived panting and threw his school bag on a folding bed. Looking at the boy, I remembered the prayer another boy had made to the goddess when he had finally got a pair of shoes. Let me never lose them. The goddess had granted his prayer. Young boys like the son of the priest now wore shoes, but many others like the rag pickers in my neighborhood remained shoeless. Paragraph change. My acquaintance with the barefoot rag pickers leads me to Simapuri, a place on the periphery of Delhi yet miles away from it. Metaphorically, those who live here are squatters who came from Bangladesh back in 1971. Sahib's family is among them. Simapuri was then a wilderness, still is, but it is no longer empty. In structures of mud with roofs of tin and tarpaulin, devoid of sewage, drainage or running water, live 10,000 rag pickers. They have lived here for more than 30 years without an identity, without permits, but with ration cards that get their names on voters' list and enable them to buy again. Food is more important for survival than an identity. If at the end of the day we can feed our families and go to bed without an aching stomach, we would rather live here than in the fields that gave us no grain. Say a group of women in tattered saris when I asked them why they left their beautiful land of green fields and rivers. Wherever they find food, they pitch their tents that become transit homes. Children grow up in them, becoming partners in survival, and survival in Simapuri means rag picking. Through the years, it has acquired the proportions of a fine art. Garbage to them is gold. It is their daily bread, a roof over their heads, even if it is a leaking roof. But for a child, it is even more. Paragraph change. I sometimes find a rupee, even a 10 rupee note, Sahib says, his eyes lighting up. When you can find a silver coin in a heap of garbage, you don't stop scrounging, for there is hope of finding more. It seems that for children, garbage has a meaning different from what it means to their parents. For the children, it is a wrapped in wonder. For the elder, it is a means of survival. Paragraph change. One winter morning, I see Sahib standing by the fenced gate of the neighborhood club watching two young men dressed in white playing tennis. I like the game, he hums. Content to watch it, standing behind the fence, I go inside when no one is around. He admits the gatekeeper lets me use the swing. Paragraph change. Sahib too is wearing tennis shoes that look strange over his discolored shirt and shorts. Someone gave them to me, he says in the manner of an explanation. The fact that they are discarded shoe of some rich boy who perhaps refused to wear them because of a hole in one of them does not bother him. For one who has walked, page number 23. Barefoot, even shoes with a hole is a dream come true. But the game he is watching so intently is out of his reach. Paragraph change. This morning, Sahib is on his way to the milk booth. In his hand is a steel canister. I now work in a tea stall down the road. He says, pointing in the distance, I am paid 800 rupees on all my meals. Does he like the job? I ask. His face, I see, has lost the carefree look. The steel canister seems heavier than the plastic bag he would carry so lightly over his shoulder. The bag was his. The canister belongs to the man who owns the tea shop. Sahib is no longer his own master. I want to drive a car. Mukesh insists on being his own master. I will be a motor mechanic, he announces. Do you know anything about cars? I ask. Paragraph 10. I will learn to drive a car, he answers, looking straight into my eyes. His dream looms like a mirage amidst the dust of the streets that fill his town, Firozabad, famous for its bangles. Every other family in Firozabad is engaged in making bangles. It is the center of India's glass blowing industry, where families have spent generations working around furnaces, welding glass, making bangles for all the women in the land, it seems. Paragraph change. Mukesh's family is among them. None of them know that it is illegal for children like him to work in the glass furnaces with high temperatures. in dingy cells without air and light that the law, if enforced, could get him and all those 20,000 children out of the hot furnaces where they slog their daylight hours, often losing the brightness of their eyes. Mukesh's eyes beam as he volunteers to take me home, which he proudly say is being rebuilt. We walk down stinking lanes choked with garbage, past homes that remain hovels with crumbling walls, wobbly doors, no window, crowded with families of human and animals coexisting in a primeval state. He stops at the door of one such a house, bangs a wobbly iron door with his foot and pushes it open. We enter a half-built shack. In one part of it, thatched with dead grass, is a firewood stove over which sits a large vessel of sizzling spinach leaves. On the ground, in the large aluminium platters, are more chopped vegetables. A frail young woman is cooking the evening meal for the whole family. Through eyes filled with the smoke, she smiles. She is the wife of Mukesh's elder brother, not much older in years. She has begun to command respect as the Bahu, the daughter-in-law of the house, already in charge of 3 men, her husband, Mukesh, and their father. When the older man enters, she gently withdraws behind the broken wall and brings her well closer to her face. As custom demands, daughter-in-law must veil their faces before male elders. In this case, the elder is an impoverished bangle maker. Despite long years of hard labor, first as a tailor, then a bangle maker, he has failed to renovate a house. Send his 2 sons to page number 24. School, all he has managed to do is teach them what he knows, the art of making bangles. Paragraph change. It is his karam, his destiny, says Mukesh's grandmother, who has watched her own husband go blind with the dust from polishing the glass of bangles. Can a God-given lineage ever be broken? She implies. Born in the caste of bangle makers, they have seen nothing but bangles. In the house, in the yard, in every other house, every other yard, every street in Firozabad, spirals of bangles, sunny gold, paddy green, royal blue, pink, purple, every color born out of the 7 colors of the rainbow, lie in mounds in unkempt yards, are piled on 4-wheeled handcarts pushed by young men along the narrow lanes of the shanty town, and in dark hutments next to lines of flames of flickering oil lamps sit boys and girls with their fathers and mothers welding pieces of colored glass into circles of bangles. Their eyes are more adjusted to the dark than to the light outside. This is why they often end up losing their eyesight before they become adults. Paragraph change. Sabita, a young girl in a drab pink dress, sit alongside an elderly woman soldering pieces of glass as her hands move mechanically like the tongs of a machine. I wonder if she knows the sanctity of the bangles she helps make. It symbolize an Indian woman's suhag, auspiciousness in marriage. It will dawn on her suddenly one day when her head is draped with a red veil, her husband dyed red with henna, and red bangles rolled onto her wrist. She will then become a bride like the old woman beside her, who became one many years ago. She still has bangles on her wrist, but no light in her eyes. एक वक्त शेर बर खाना भी नहीं खाया. She says in a voice drained of joy. She has not enjoyed even one full meal in her entire lifetime. That's what she has reaped. Her husband, an old man with a flowing beard, says, I know nothing except bangles. All I have done is make a house for the family to live in. Hearing him, one wonders if he has achieved what many have failed in their lifetime. He has a roof over his head. The cry of not having money to do anything except carry on the business of making bangles, not even enough to eat, rings in every home. The young man echoed the lament of their elders. Little has moved with time, it seems, in Firozabad. Years of mind-numbing toil have killed all initiative and the ability to dream. Paragraph change. Why not organize yourself into a cooperative? I ask a group of young men who have fallen into the vicious circles of middlemen who trapped their fathers and forefathers. Even if we got organized, we are the ones who will be hauled up by the police, beaten and dragged to jail for doing something illegal. They say there is no 25 page number leader among them, no one who could help them see things differently. Their fathers are as tired as they are. They talk endlessly in a spiral that moves from poverty to apathy to greed and to injustice. Paragraph change. Listening to them, I see two distinct worlds. One of the family caught in a web of poverty, burdened by the stigma of caste in which they are born. The others a vicious circle of the shawkars, the middlemen, the policemen, the keepers of law, the bureaucrats and the politicians. Together they have imposed the baggage on the child that he cannot put down. Before he is aware, he accepts it is as naturally as his father. To do anything else would mean to dare, and daring is not part of his growing up. When I sense a flash of it in Mukesh, I am cheered. I want to be a motor mechanic, he repeats. He will go to a garage and learn, but the garage is a long way from his home. I will walk, he insists. Do you also dream of flying a plane? He is suddenly silent. No, he says, staring at the ground. In his small murmur, there is an embarrassment that has not yet turned into regret. He is content to dream of cars that he sees hurtling down the street of his town. Few airplanes fly over Firozabad. Chapter end.
Lesson 5. India's Gifts to the World. Paragraph number 1 starts. It has become common knowledge that yoga is good for you. Currently, yoga is being used as a therapy for cancer, infertility, lung disease, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, insomnia, high blood pressure, and joint pain. Yet, there is very little awareness and understanding on exactly how yoga heals. Even in the yoga and medical communities, the key is to understand the relationship between stress, yoga, and disease. Paragraph change. Medical research estimates that as much as 90% of illness and disease is stress related. A few of the many diseases and conditions that have been linked to an overactive stress response include cardiovascular disease, depression, anxiety, some types of diabetes, mellitus, etc. Paragraph change. What we feel as stress is the product of the sympathetic nervous system or the fight or flight response, an almost instantaneous surge in heart rate, cardiac output, blood pressure, sweating, shallow breathing, and metabolism, combined with a tensing of muscles internally. The fight or flight response shuts down digestion and elimination and reduces blood flow to the internal organs. Short term, this stress reaction is a good thing. The fight or flight response prepares us to respond to any environmental threat by fighting against it or fleeing from it. But long-term continuous exposure to stress is harmful, placing excess wear and tear on the body's systems and severely limiting the body's natural maintenance and healing abilities. Paragraph change. Chronic stress can lead to continuously high levels of cortisol. This hormone at normal levels helps to maintain an active, healthy body, including regulation of metabolism and blood pressure. But excessive amounts of cortisol can suppress the immune system and cause sleep disturbances and loss of appetite. High levels of cortisol can also increase your heart rate, blood pressure, and your cholesterol and triglyceride levels, risk factors for both heart attacks and strokes. The byproducts of cortisol act as sedatives, which can lead to changes in mood, especially to feelings of depression. Paragraph change. Fortunately, the body has a natural counterbalance to the fight or flight response called the parasympathetic nervous system or the relaxation response. The parasympathetic nervous system becomes activated when the threat or stressor has passed or ended. But it can also be consciously activated by deepening the breath and by relaxing the skeletal muscles. Paragraph change. Please turn the page. When activated, the parasympathetic nervous system lowers blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration, the pace of the breath. Digestion and elimination are allowed to be stimulated and blood is free to travel to the digestive, reproductive, glandular, and immune systems necessarily for the promotion of long-term health. The relaxation response is also known as the rest and renew stage, when the body has the time and resources to heal the body and to respond to illness. Obviously, by increasing the frequency, time, and depth of the relaxation response, we not only allow our body to recover from illness and disease, but we also practice preventive medicine by allowing the body to perform all of its essential maintenance tasks. Paragraph change. Yoga's emphasis on long, deep breathing and conscious relaxation activates the parasympathetic nervous system and promotes its rest and renew functions. In fact, a recent study has shown yoga to decrease the level of the stress hormone cortisol in the blood. The meditative practices of yoga help to reduce the responsiveness of the mind to stressors and to lessen the intensity of the fight or flight response. Yoga also teaches us to see potential stressors as challenges rather than threats, enabling one to avoid the stress response entirely. Paragraph change. Not only does yoga's ability to activate the parasympathetic nervous system reduces stress and allow the body to heal itself, but the practice of yoga also improves the body's inherent healing abilities. Paragraph change. The inverting, twisting and compressing that occur in yoga postures enhance the circulation of blood and body fluids. This increases in circulation not only improves the body's ability to deliver the materials needed to allow healing to take place, but also activates the lymphatic system to maintain normal functioning of the immune system and inflammation response. Yoga postures also improve muscles strength, flexibility and range of motion, all very important for the healing and prevention of musculoskeletal disease such as arthritis and osteoporosis. Paragraph change. Yoga's emphasis on deep breathing combined with back bends improves lung capacity and function. Practicing yoga also encourages one to lead a healthier lifestyle through developing the self-awareness and discipline required for positive behavior modification. Paragraph change. While yoga provides such a strong support to the body's healing mechanisms, it is important to view yoga as an adjunct or complementary therapy and not relied upon as the only therapy for healing diseases. Chapter end.
Rainbow, Class 12th. Lesson 5. India's Gifts to the World, Part 2nd. Purity is power. Purity is strength, Swami Vivekanand. We want purity, pure food, pure water, pure air. We long for pure surroundings. We yearn for pure heart and pure love. We prefer pure environment and pure society. We are fond of purity because purity promotes health, impurities are injurious to health. Purity provides peace of mind, impurity impairs the mind. Both for bodily health and mental health, we need purity. We do require environmental purity for overall health. Paragraph change. Purity of body is physical health. Purity of speech in unsullied truth. Purity of heart is unselfish love. Purity of thought is righteous reason. Purity of mind is wholesome peace. Purity of action is sincere and unselfishness service. Purity of society is harmonious unity. Purity of environment is soul elevating serenity. Paragraph change. In the Mahabharata, there is an interesting episode to illustrate the nature of purity. The Pandavas and Kauravas were Drona's disciples. They were once summoned by the preceptor Drona for a test. The eldest of the Pandavas, Yudhishthira, was asked to bring one bad person from the society. The eldest of the Kauravas, Duryodhana, was asked to fetch one good person from the same society in Hastinapur. After a thorough search, both the cousins returned empty-handed. The pure-minded Yudhishthira found everyone to be pious and pure. The impure mind of Duryodhana found everyone to be evil and impure. As is the mind, so is the vision. Paragraph change. Purity of mind makes our vision, words and deeds pure. It has also the power to purify people. Evil has no place in the presence of purity, nor can it face purity as darkness cannot face the sun. It only gets changed into purity. Fools who come to scoff remain to pray in the presence of purity. Villains who come to harm stand in adoration in the presence of purity. Murderers become votaries of peace in the presence of purity. Paragraph change. Pava Hari Baba was a saint. He was pure and pious. He lived a very simple life. One day, when he was asleep, a thief entered his dwelling place and took away his vessel containing food. The saint woke up and saw the running thief. Immediately he picked up the remaining two vessels containing boiled vegetables and curd and ran after him. The thief stopped and the saint approached him with all purity of love and said, "Child, the food is insufficient for you. You may have this also. Please sit and eat without any hurry." The thief was wonderstruck by the affectionate words of the pure soul. There was a change in him. He prostrated himself before the saint without. Page number 35. Being pure at heart. If anybody imitates the saint, the result would be different. The thief might only give a blow and take away the vessels. The test of genuine purity is a metamorphosing ability. Paragraphs change. Once upon a time, one particular rishi called Gautam did tapasya to obtain certain powers. For several days, months and years he observed rigorous austerities. He did not eat or drink. He stood on a single foot. He controlled the senses. He meditated on the chosen deity. One day in the morning, he went to the river for a holy dip. On the bank of the river, there was a tree. The branches of the tree were outstretching towards the river. A crane was seated among the branches. When Gautam was in neck-deep water facing towards the sun, with an austere mind, the droppings of the crane fell on his head. He felt disturbed, annoyed. He looked at the bird with anger. The next moment the bird fell dead. The rishi was happy because he had obtained the power to kill a bird by his very gaze. After a while he went to the nearby village for food. He stood before a house and sought alms from the housewife. She was busy doing her domestic chores. Gautam waited for a few minutes. He was annoyed with her for the delay in responding to his call for bhiksha. The lady came, looked at him gently and said, "Sir, I am not a crane to be killed by your stare. Sorry for the delay. I was serving my husband and feeding my children. Please accept the food." The rishi was shocked. He could not know how she was able to learn about the crane which died only a short while ago. The lady further said, "Sir, don't be surprised. I am a humble housewife. If you want to know more about tapasya and the attainment of powers, please go to a particular person whose address I shall give." Saying so, she gave him the address, humbled and Crestfallen, the rishi went as directed. It was a greater shock to him to see the particular person to be an ordinary, simple man. The moment the rishi was seen, the man said, "Holy sir, welcome. I know about the crane's death and the housewife's advice. Please wait a little. I shall soon take you to home." Later at home, the rishi was surprised to see the man delaying him further. He was busily engaged in the serving his parents. He did not seem to have read any scriptures, nor did he observe any austerities, but he was bright with purity of mind. In his presence, the rishi was completely transformed. Paragraph change. His pride of tapasya disappeared. He turned modest. He became pure without anger, ill will, or haughtiness. He who is sincere in service, faithful in doing duties, and loving without selfishness is pure. The power of purity is very high and priceless. Paragraph change. The elements of nature have the ability to purify not only things but also beings as well. Man makes use of the elements to purify his body. Very often, for want of proper and pure environment, many a gem remains hidden in sands, and many a flower withers away unseen in thorns. Sometimes insufficiency and improper training spoils the inborn traits of virtue. Even if the inborn nature is a little impure, we can purify it and make it perfect through nurture. Dogs in the streets are dirty with dirty. Page turn. Habits. But a well brought up dog is not only clean but behaves very methodologically and decently. Man does inherit the traits of animals, but through training he becomes man. Through samskars and nature, the impure legacy from the animal is washed off, and the latent purity in man is made to shine. Paragraph change. Parrots speak if trained. They can imitate human speech. Two parrots were brought up by two people. One was a hunter and other a scholar. They both trained their pets in speech. The first parrot brought up by the hunter spoke words of harshness. Its expressions were crude, rude, uncivilized. The second bird had acquired softness in speech. It spoke with refinement and culture. The first one learned the vulgar slang of the cruel hunter and his customers. The latter was quick in the repeating the kind words of affectionate welcome and farewell in the scholar's house. Both the parrots were brothers born to the same mother bird, but on account of the bringing up and the atmosphere available around, their expression and behavior differed very greatly. It is not enough if we are born pure. We should also be brought up in a pure atmosphere among the cultured people, else the inborn purity will wither away or will get eclipsed by the contempting time and place of impure environment. Chapter end.